Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the large window of the USV Perseverance and watched as the last human ships left New Geneva Colony. The planet looked smaller now as they moved away from it. She could see the lights of the cities they had built. Over 30 years. Soon those lights would be turned off forever. Behind the human ships, alien vessels moved closer to the planet. The ships were sleek and white, nothing like the rough metal hulls of human vessels. Elena knew those ships carried the new owners of New Geneva. The aliens would take everything humans had built and call it their own. "All ships report ready for jump to hyperspace," said Lieutenant Torres from his station behind Elena. His voice was steady, but she could hear the anger underneath. They all felt it. The anger at being forced to leave their homes. Elena turned away from the window. The bridge of the Perseverance was full of people working at their stations. These men and women had families on the transport ships following behind them. Children who would grow up never seeing the worlds their parents had built. "Signal the fleet," Elena said. "Begin jump sequence in 5 minutes." She walked to her command chair and sat down. On the main screen she could see the other human ships, spread out in formation. There were military vessels like hers, but most were civilian transports packed with people and whatever they could carry. Everything else had to be left behind. Elena thought about the meeting 3 months ago. She had been there when the Galactic Coalition delivered their message to Earth. The aliens had filled the Great Hall with their strange shapes and colors. Some looked like living crystals that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. Others were more like sea creatures, with tentacles that moved through the air as if it was water. The one who spoke for them was tall and thin, with skin that looked like metal. Its voice came through a translator box that made everything sound cold and empty. "Humanity has proven too dangerous to remain in civilized space," the alien had said. "You are aggressive. You fight when others would talk. You take risks that put everyone in danger. The Coalition has voted. All humans must leave the inner systems within 30 standard cycles." The human ambassador had tried to argue. He spoke about all the good things humans had done, about the colonies they had built, about the trade agreements and treaties. The aliens listened without showing any emotion. "The decision is final," the metal-skinned alien had said. "Humanity will relocate beyond the outer rim. Any human vessels that remain in Coalition space after the deadline will be destroyed." Elena remembered the silence that followed. No one had expected this. Yes, humans were different from the other races. They were quicker to fight, faster to take chances. But they had followed the laws. They had paid their taxes. They had been good citizens of the galaxy. It did not matter. The Coalition wanted them gone. Now Elena watched as the hyperspace countdown reached 0. One by one, the human ships vanished in flashes of white light. The Perseverance was one of the last to go. Elena took one final look at New Geneva before giving the order, "Jump." The stars stretched into lines and then disappeared. The ship shook as it entered hyperspace. Elena felt the familiar twist in her stomach that came with faster-than-light travel. When it was over, they were alone in the dark between stars. The fleet gathered in empty space far from any sun. Out here, there were no planets, no space stations, no signs of life. This was the frontier, the place where maps ended. The Coalition. Races never came here. They called it too dangerous, too wild. Elena opened a communication channel to all ships. "This is Admiral Vasquez," she said. She had been promoted when they left Coalition space. The humans needed military leaders now more than ever. "I know this is hard. We all left behind things we loved. Friends we will never see again. Homes we built with our own hands." She paused and looked around the bridge. Every person there was listening. "But we are not defeated. We are still here. We are still human. The Coalition thinks they have solved a problem by getting rid of us. They think space will be safer without humans in it." Elena smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "They are wrong. We will survive out here. We will build new homes. We will grow strong in the dark places where they are afraid to go, and maybe someday they will need us again." The communication channel crackled with voices from other ships. Captains reporting their status, asking for orders, wondering what came next. Elena had some answers, but not all of them. The human fleet had supplies for 6 months. They had portable habitat domes, food processors, mining equipment, and everything needed to start over. Scout ships had already found asteroid fields rich in metals and water ice. It would be enough to begin with. All civilian ships proceed to asteroid field Delta 7, Elena ordered. Begin setting up temporary habitats. Military vessels will establish a perimeter and begin long-range scanning. As the ships moved away, Elena stayed on the bridge. She was tired but not ready to rest. There was too much to think about. Too much to plan. Dr. Marcus Chun joined her at the observation window. He was the fleet's chief science officer, a thin man with gray hair who always looked like he was solving a puzzle in his head. "The readings from this sector are interesting," he said quietly. "There are energy signatures I have never seen before, very old ones." Elena looked at him. "How old?" "Maybe 1,000,000 years, maybe more." Chun adjusted his glasses. "There are ruins out there, Admiral. Dead cities on dead worlds. Whoever built them had technology we can barely understand." "Are they dangerous?" "I do not think so. Whatever happened to them was long ago, but studying them might teach us things. Important things." Elena nodded. Knowledge was a weapon, and humans needed every weapon they could get. The hours passed slowly as the fleet spread out through the asteroid field. Elena watched the reports come in. Habitat domes were being set up. Mining operations were starting. Children were being moved into temporary schools. Life was beginning again, even in this empty place, but Elena knew this was just the beginning. The coalition had made humans into exiles. They had pushed them into the dark corners of space where no civilized race would go. The aliens thought this would be the end of the human problem. They were wrong. Elena could feel it in her bones. Out here in the darkness, humans would not just survive. They would become something new, something harder, something the galaxy had never seen before. She thought about her daughter Sarah, now 18 years old and training to be a pilot. Sarah had been born in coalition space but would grow up out here in the void. She would never know the comfort of civilized worlds. She would know only the harsh reality of survival. Maybe that was better. Maybe the coalition had done humanity a favor without knowing it. They had forced humans to leave their soft, easy lives behind. Now humans would have to become strong or die. Elena smiled again, and this time it was real. The coalition thought they had won. They thought space would be peaceful without humans causing trouble. They had no idea what was coming. 50 years had passed since the exile. Sarah Cross stood in the command center of Station Haven and looked at the holographic display showing human settlements across the outer rim. Her mother Elena had been right about one thing. Humans had survived, but they had become something different. Station Haven was built inside a hollow asteroid, far from any star. The asteroid spun slowly to create gravity, and its metal corridors were filled with the sounds of human life. Children laughed as they ran to school. Workers talked about their shifts in the mining tunnels. Families shared meals in the communal eating areas. None of these children had ever seen a green world with blue skies. They were born in the dark between stars, and they were happy there. Sarah sometimes wondered what her mother would think if she could see them now. "Admiral Cross," said Lieutenant Park, approaching with a datapad. "Dr. Chun wants to see you in the research lab. He says it's urgent." Sarah nodded and walked through the station's main corridor. The walls were made of polished metal salvaged from dead ships. Pictures hung on them showing the old colonies humans had lost. New Geneva, Terra Nova, Armstrong Base. The children looked at these pictures like they were fairy tales. The research lab was in the deepest part of the station. Dr. Chun was older now. His hair completely white, but his eyes still held the same curious light they had 50 years ago. He looked up when Sarah entered. "We found something," he said simply. Chun led her to a large table covered with strange objects. They looked like pieces of broken machinery, but the metal was unlike anything Sarah had seen. It seemed to shift colors in the light and touching. It made her fingers tingle. These came from the ruins on Kepler 442c, Chun explained. We've been studying them for months. I think I finally understand what they are. He picked up one of the pieces and turned it over in his hands. This civilization was advanced beyond anything we know today. They had ships that could cross the galaxy in days. They had weapons that could crack planets in half. They had technology that made the Coalition look like children playing with sticks. Sarah frowned. What happened to them? They were destroyed, Chun said quietly, all of them. Every world, every ship, every living being. Something came out of the dark space between galaxies and wiped them out completely. Chun activated a holographic projector. Images appeared in the air above the table. They showed great cities burning, ships being torn apart by strange forces, and finally empty worlds covered in ash. The records call them the Devourers, Chun continued. They were machines, but not like any machines we understand. They seemed to feed on energy itself. They would consume entire stars and leave nothing but cold emptiness behind. Sarah studied the images. How long ago did this happen? About 2 million years, but here's the important part. Shun's voice grew serious. This wasn't the first time. The records show this has happened before. Every few million years, the Devourers come back. They sweep across the galaxy, destroy everything, and then disappear again. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the stations recycled. Air, you think they're coming back? I don't think it, Chun said. I know it, the patterns are clear. The energy readings from deep space are changing. Something big is moving out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the human settlements scattered across. The outer rim, tough people living in tough places, but still just people. If something had destroyed a civilization millions of years more advanced than humans, what chance did they have? How long do we have? She asked. Maybe 10 years, maybe less. Sarah left the research lab with her mind spinning. She walked through the station's corridors and saw everything differently now. The children playing games, the workers coming off their shifts, the families eating together. All of it could be gone soon. She made her way to the training center where the next generation of human warriors practiced. These young men and women had grown up in the void. They knew how to fight in zero gravity, how to survive when life support failed, how to make weapons from scrap metal. The Coalition had exiled humans to make space safer, but they had actually created the most dangerous soldiers in the galaxy. Commander Jake Morrison was running a combat drill when Sarah arrived. The trainees moved through a maze of obstacles, fighting holographic enemies that looked like alien soldiers. Jake was Sarah's age, born during the exile like her. He had never known peace or safety, only the constant struggle to survive. How are they doing? Sarah asked. Jake watched a young woman leap between two floating platforms while firing her weapon. Better than their parents were at that age. These kids have been fighting since they could walk. They don't know how to give up. Sarah thought about telling Jake what Chun had discovered, but decided to wait. There would be time for that later. Instead, she walked to the observation deck where her mother used to stand. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the farthest human settlements, something ancient and terrible was stirring. The communication system crackled to life. Admiral crossed to the command center. Priority message from Scout Ship Ranger. Sarah hurried back to the command center. The main screen showed Captain Torres, now an old man but still flying scout missions to the edge of known space. His face was pale and worried. Admiral, we've detected energy signatures moving toward Coalition space, Torres reported. They're unlike anything we've seen before. Massive objects, maybe ship-sized, but the readings don't make sense. How many? Sarah asked. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're still too far away to get clear readings, but they're definitely moving this way. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Chun had said they might have 10 years. It looked like they had much less. After the communication ended, Sarah called an emergency meeting of all human settlement leaders. Within hours, holographic projections of captains, administrators, and colony leaders filled the command center. These were the children and grandchildren of the exiles, people who had built new lives in the darkness. "We have a problem," Sarah began. She told them about Chun's research, about the Devourers, about the energy signatures moving toward inhabited space. The room was silent when she finished. "What about the Coalition?" asked Captain Martinez from Mining Station Alpha. "Shouldn't we warn them?" Sarah almost laughed. "You think they'll listen to us? We're the dangerous ones, remember? The ones they threw out to make space safer." "So what do we do?" asked Dr. Patel from Research Station Beta. Sarah looked around the room at these people who had never known anything but hardship and still survived. "We do what humans do," she said. "We prepare to fight. We study these ruins and learn everything we can about the Devourers. We train our people and build our weapons. And when the time comes, we show the galaxy what 50 years in the dark has made us." The meeting lasted for hours as they planned and prepared. When it was over, Sarah stood alone in the command center and looked at the star map showing human territory. It was small compared to Coalition space, just a few dozen systems on the edge of nowhere, but it was theirs. They had built it with their own hands, paid for it with their own blood, and when the Devourers came, they would defend it with everything. The Coalition had wanted humans gone because they were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too willing to fight. They were about to learn that 50 years of exile had made humans far more dangerous than they ever imagined. The first attack came without warning. Sarah Cross was in her quarters on Station Haven when the emergency alarms began to sound. She ran to the command center where Lieutenant Park was staring at his screens with wide eyes. "What is it?" Sarah demanded. "Signal from the Coalition border, Admiral," Park said, his voice shaking. "The Zarian system has gone dark. All communication stopped 3 hours ago." Sarah felt ice in her veins. Zarian Prime was the homeworld of the crystalline beings who had led the vote to exile humanity. It was one of the most powerful worlds in Coalition space, protected by massive defense fleets. "Are we sure the signal isn't just damaged?" Sarah asked. Park shook his head. "We're picking up Coalition military transmissions from nearby systems. They're in full panic. Ships fleeing, emergency broadcasts, requests for help." The main screen flickered to life, showing a grainy transmission from a Coalition vessel. The alien captain was one of the squid-like beings from Thalassa. Its tentacles writhed in obvious distress as it spoke through a universal translator. "This is Captain Veltar of the Coalition defense ship Harmony," the alien said. "The Zarian system has been destroyed. Repeat, Zarian Prime and all inhabited worlds are gone. We observed massive objects emerging from dark space. They consumed the star itself. Nothing remains." The transmission cut to static. Sarah stared at the empty screen. Dr. Chun had said the Devourers fed on energy, but she had not really understood what that meant until now. They did not just destroy civilizations. They ate the very stars that gave them light. "Get me Dr. Chun," Sarah ordered. Chun arrived within minutes, looking older and more tired than ever. He listened to the reports without speaking, but Sarah could see the fear growing in his eyes. "It's starting," he said finally, "just like the ancient records described. They come from the space between galaxies, they consume everything they find, and then they move on." Over the next few days more reports came in. The ocean world of Thalassa sent desperate messages before falling silent. The trading hub of Centauri Station simply vanished, leaving only empty space where a thriving city had existed for centuries. The Devourers moved through Coalition space like a plague. Wherever they went, entire systems disappeared, not destroyed, not conquered, but completely erased as if they had never existed at all. Sarah called another emergency meeting of human leaders. This time, the holographic faces around the command center showed fear and anger in equal measure. "The Coalition is falling apart," reported Captain Torres from his scout ship. "Their fleets are retreating to the core worlds, but the Devourers are following them. Every day, more systems go dark." "What about Earth?" asked Dr. Patel. Sarah had been wondering the same thing. Earth was deep in coalition space, surrounded by alien worlds that were now under attack. She had not spoken to anyone from Earth in 50 years, but it was still the birth world of humanity. "No word yet," Torres said. "But if the pattern continues, the Devourers will reach Earth within months." The room fell silent. Despite everything that had happened, despite the exile and the years of hardship, Earth was still home to billions of humans. People who had chosen to stay in coalition space when the exile began. People who thought they would be safer under alien protection. "We have to do something," said Commander Morrison from the training center. "Like what?" Captain Martinez asked. "We have maybe 50,000 people spread across a dozen stations. The coalition has billions of citizens and the most powerful military in the galaxy. If they can't stop these things, what can we do?" Sarah looked around the room at these people who had survived 50 years in the void. They were right to be afraid. The Devourers had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than anything humans had ever built. But something about the situation felt wrong to her. "Dr. Chun," she said, "in your research, did you find any record of anything ever stopping the Devourers?" Chun adjusted his glasses and thought for a moment. "Actually, yes. The records are incomplete, but there are references to something called the Last War. It happened about 4 million years ago. Several species working together managed to drive the Devourers back into dark space." "What species?" "I don't know. Most of the records were destroyed. But there are hints that they were not like the coalition races. They were described as aggressive, unpredictable, willing to fight even when defeat seemed certain." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. "They sound familiar." "Yes," Chun said quietly, "they sound like humans." The meeting continued for hours as they debated what to do. Some wanted to flee deeper into the void, to hide until the Devourers passed. Others wanted to try to contact Earth and offer help. A few suggested that this was the coalition's problem and humans should let them deal with it. Sarah listened to all of them, but her mind was made up. The coalition had exiled humans because they were too dangerous, too willing to fight. Now something was coming that only dangerous, fighting people could stop. The next morning, Sarah stood in the observation deck of Station Haven and watched human ships preparing for departure. She had given the order that would change everything. The human fleets were going home, not all of them. The children and non-combatants would stay in the safe darkness of the Outer Rim, but every human who could fight, every ship that could carry weapons, every person who remembered what it meant to be told they were not wanted, they were all going back to coalition space. Commander Morrison joined her at the window. "Think they'll be happy to see us?" he asked to Sarah. Smiled grimly. "I doubt it. But they need us now, whether they want to admit it or not." "What if we can't stop these Devourer things?" "Then we die fighting," Sarah said. "It's what humans do." The fleet that assembled at the edge of human space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These were not the clean, elegant ships of the coalition races. Human vessels were rough and angular, built for war rather than beauty. They carried weapons designed by people who had learned to fight in the dark places where civilized races feared to go. Sarah stood on the bridge of the USV Retribution, named after her mother's old ship. Around her, men and women who had been born in exile prepared for a war they might not survive. They did not look afraid. They looked angry. "All ships report ready," Lieutenant Park announced. Sarah looked out at the stars ahead of them. Somewhere in that direction, the coalition worlds were falling one by one to an enemy they could not understand. The same aliens who had exiled humanity were now dying because they had never learned how to fight something truly dangerous. "Signal the fleet," Sarah ordered. "We're going home." The human ships jumped into hyperspace, heading toward coalition space for the first time in 50 years. Behind them, the darkness of the Outer Rim waited patiently. It had taught humans how to survive in impossible places. Now it was time to see if those lessons would be enough to save a galaxy that had never wanted them. As the Retribution flew through hyperspace, Sarah thought about her mother Elena, who had died 10 years ago, still believing that someday the galaxy would need humans again. She had been right, but even she could not have imagined it would happen like this. The Coalition had forced humans to leave because they were too dangerous. Now they were about to learn that 50 years of exile had made them far more dangerous than anyone had ever dreamed. The question was whether that would be enough to stop something that had been killing civilizations. Since before humans had learned to make fire, Sarah stood straight and watched the stars rush past. Soon they would find out. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of what used to be the Altair system. Sarah Cross stood on the bridge of the Retribution and stared at empty space where a star should have been. The Devourers had been here. Standing for debris, reported Lieutenant Park. There's nothing, Admiral. No planets, no asteroids, not even space dust. It's like the entire system was never here. Sarah felt a cold anger building in her chest. Altair had been home to 3 billion people from 4 different species. Now there was only darkness. Set course for the Beta Centauri system, she ordered. And send out scout ships. I want to know where these things are. The human fleet moved deeper into what had been Coalition space. Every system they checked was either empty or under attack. The Devourers were not like any enemy the galaxy had faced before. They did not want territory or resources or slaves. They simply consumed everything and moved on. On the 4th day, they found survivors. The Coalition fleet was hiding in the shadow of a gas giant, their ships damaged and their crews terrified. Admiral Kethver of the Coalition Defense Force was a proud Altarian with blue skin and golden eyes. When his face appeared on the communication screen, he looked like he had aged 10 years in the past week. Unknown vessels, Kethver said. Identify yourselves immediately or we will open fire. Sarah smiled coldly. This is Admiral Sarah Cross of the Human Liberation Fleet. I think you need to talk. The silence that followed lasted nearly a minute. Sarah could imagine the panic. On the Coalition ships, as they realized who they were facing, humans were supposed to be gone, banished to the outer darkness where they belonged. Finally, Kethver spoke again. His voice was carefully controlled, but Sarah could hear the desperation underneath. Admiral Cross, what are you doing here? Human. Vessels are forbidden in Coalition space. Your Coalition space doesn't seem to exist anymore, Sarah replied. From what I can see, you have bigger problems than worrying about humans. Another long pause. Then Kethver said, We need to talk. Can you come aboard my ship? Sarah almost laughed. I don't think so. You can come to mine. An hour later, Admiral Kethver stood in the conference room of the Retribution. He was surrounded by human officers who looked at him like he was something unpleasant they had found. On their boots, Sarah sat at the head of the table and studied the alien who had helped vote for humanity's exile 50 years ago. You look different than I expected, Kethver said finally. 50 years in the void changes people, Sarah replied. What do you want, Admiral? Kethver straightened his uniform and tried to look official. The Coalition Council has authorized me to negotiate a temporary alliance. We are willing to overlook your illegal presence in our space if you help us fight these invaders. Commander Morrison laughed. Overlook our illegal presence? You kicked us out, remember? That was a long time ago, Kethver said. Things have changed. Yes, they have, Sarah said. You're losing. Your fleets are scattered, your worlds are gone, and you have no idea how to fight these things. But we do, Kethver looked surprised. You fought them before? Not us personally, Sarah said, but we've studied the records. We know what they are and how they work. The question is, are you willing to do what it takes to stop them? We'll do anything, Kethver said quickly. Sarah leaned forward. Anything, even if it means following human battle plans? Even if it means using tactics your civilized minds find brutal and wrong? Kethver was quiet for a moment. Sarah could see him thinking, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. Yes, we have no choice. Then here's how this works, Sarah said. Your ships will follow our orders. Your crews will do exactly what we tell them to do. And you will not question our methods, no matter how violent they seem. The first battle came 2 days later. The Devourers had found the refugee fleet hiding near a dead planet. Sarah watched them approach on the main screen. They did not look like ships at all. They were massive black shapes that seemed to bend. Light around them. As they moved, space itself seemed to twist and break. "Coalition fleet reports ready," Lieutenant Park said. Sarah looked at the tactical display. The Coalition ships were arranged in their traditional battle formation, clean lines and careful spacing designed for ship-to-ship combat. It would have been impressive against any normal enemy. "Tell them to forget everything they know about space warfare," Sarah ordered. "We're not fighting ships, we're fighting cancer." The human vessels moved in a completely different pattern. They spread out in all directions, some diving under the enemy formation, others climbing above it. There was no neat organization, no careful planning. It looked like chaos, but it worked. The first Devourer ship was surprised when 3 human vessels attacked it from different angles at once. Human weapons were not elegant. They were crude plasma cannons and nuclear torpedoes built to destroy rather than disable. When they hit the alien vessel, pieces of it actually broke off and drifted away. "It's working," Commander Morrison reported from his ship. "They're not used to this kind of fighting." The Coalition ships tried to copy the human tactics, but they were too slow, too careful. Their crews had been trained to fight honorably, to give their enemies a chance to surrender. The Devourers did not surrender. They consumed everything they touched and kept moving. Sarah watched as one Coalition cruiser tried to ram a Devourer vessel. It was a desperate move, the kind of thing civilized races only did when everything else had failed. The cruiser disappeared into the black hull of the enemy ship and never came out. "Pull the Coalition ships back," Sarah ordered. "They're not ready for this kind of war." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the humans had destroyed 2 Devourer vessels and driven the rest away, but the cost had been high. 7 human ships were gone, along with nearly 1,000 crew members. Sarah stood in the observation deck of the Retribution and looked at the debris floating in space. Some of it was metal from human ships. Some of it was the strange black material that made up Devourer hulls. She could not tell the difference anymore. Admiral Kethver found her there an hour later. He looked shaken by what he had witnessed. "How did you know how to fight them?" he asked. "We didn't," Sarah said. "We just did what humans do when something tries to kill us. We hit back harder. Your people died today." "Yes, they did. And more will die tomorrow, and the day after that. That's what war means." Sarah turned to look at the alien admiral. "Your people forgot that a long time ago. You thought you could solve everything with talking and treaties and careful diplomacy, but some things can't be reasoned with." Kethver was quiet for a moment, then he said, "What do you need from us?" "Everything," Sarah replied. "Every ship, every weapon, every person who can fight. And you need to stop thinking like civilized people and start thinking like survivors." Over the next week, more Coalition survivors found them. They came in damaged ships, carrying stories of entire worlds being consumed in minutes. Sarah organized them into battle groups, mixing human and alien crews. She taught them to fight dirty, to use tactics that would have horrified them a month ago. The aliens learned slowly, but they learned they had to. The alternative was extinction. Word spread through the remains of Coalition space. The humans had returned and they were fighting the invaders. Some aliens still remembered the old hatred, but most were too desperate to care. They needed help, and humans were the only ones offering it. Sarah broadcast a message to any Coalition forces still fighting. "This is Admiral Cross of the Human Liberation Fleet. We know you kicked us out 50 years ago. We know you thought space would be safer without us. You were wrong. But we're here now, and we're going to save your worlds whether you want us to or not, because that's what humans do. We protect the innocent even when the innocent don't want our protection." The message was heard across a dozen systems. And slowly, carefully, the survivors began to hope. The war lasted 3 years. Sarah Cross stood in the ruins of what had been the Coalition Council chambers on Galactic Prime. Half the building was gone, destroyed when the Devourers tried to consume the planet's core. The other half was burned. Black from weapons that should never have been used on a civilized world, but they had one. The last Devourer ship had been destroyed 2 days ago. Its wreckage scattered across 3 solar systems. The ancient enemy that had consumed galaxies for millions of years was finally gone. The cost had been terrible, but they had won. Sarah walked through the broken chambers where aliens had once debated the fate of humanity. The beautiful crystal walls were cracked and dark. The floating platforms where delegates had stood were twisted metal. Everything elegant and civilized had been burned away by the fires of war. Admiral Kethver found her there. The alien looked older now, his blue skin marked with scars from a dozen battles. He had learned to fight like a human over the past 3 years. It had kept him alive, but it had changed him in ways that could never be undone. The casualty reports are complete, he said quietly. Sarah nodded but did not turn around. She already knew the numbers would be bad. 40% of all coalition worlds are gone, Kethver continued. 2 billion people dead, most of the fleet destroyed. The government has collapsed. What about Earth? Sarah asked. Earth survived. The Devourers never reached it. Your people there are safe. Sarah felt relief wash over her. She had not spoken to anyone from Earth in 50 years, but it was still home to billions of humans who had chosen to stay in coalition space. And the human casualties? Kethver was quiet for a moment. 60% of your people who came back to fight are dead. Admiral. They died saving worlds that had exiled them. Sarah finally turned around. They died doing what was right. That's all that matters. Footsteps echoed through the broken chamber. More aliens were arriving. Sarah recognized some of them. Delegates who had survived the war, military officers who had learned to fight alongside humans, citizens who had lost everything but were still alive. Because human soldiers had stood between them and extinction, they gathered in a circle around Sarah. Some looked grateful. Some looked afraid. All of them looked at her like she held the power to decide their future. We need to talk about what happens now, said Counselor Velinara, a tall being with silver skin who had opposed the human exile 50 years ago. The coalition is broken. Most of our worlds are gone. Our government exists only on paper. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her. What do you want from me? Leadership, Kethver said. Your people saved us. They have the right to rule what remains. Sarah almost laughed. You want humans to take over? The same humans you exiled because we were too dangerous. That was a mistake, Velinara admitted. We see that now. You were dangerous, yes. But you were dangerous to our enemies, not to us. We should have understood that. Understanding comes too late sometimes, Sarah said. She walked to where the council leader's platform had once stood. Now there was only rubble and twisted metal. We're offering you everything, another delegate said. Command of all military forces, control of trade routes, the right to write new laws. You could rule the galaxy. Sarah looked at them for a long moment. These beings had once been proud and powerful. They had controlled hundreds of worlds and thought themselves masters of space. Now they were begging humans to save them from the consequences of their own fear and prejudice. No, Sarah said finally. The word echoed through the broken chamber. The aliens looked confused, as if they had not understood what she said. No, Kethver repeated. We didn't come back to rule you, Sarah explained. We came back to do what was right. The job is finished. Velinara stepped forward. But you can't just leave again. We need you. Without human leadership, the remaining worlds will fall into chaos. Sarah smiled, but it was not a kind smile. You'll figure it out. You always do, eventually. She turned to walk away, but Kethver blocked her path. Admiral, please, think about what you're saying. You have the power to shape the future of the galaxy. You could make sure something like this never happens again. Something like this will happen again, Sarah said. In a few million years, something else will come out of the dark between galaxies. And when it does, you'll need people who are willing to fight. People who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. People who know that sometimes you have to be dangerous to protect what matters. She looked around at the faces surrounding her. The problem is, you'll forget that lesson as soon as the danger passes. You'll go back to your comfortable lives and your civilized ways. And when someone like us shows up again, someone willing to fight for you, you'll be afraid of them too." The chamber fell silent. Sarah could see the truth of her words in their faces. They were already forgetting the lessons they had learned during the war, already returning to the old ways of thinking that had gotten them into this mess. "So what do you suggest?" Velinar asked. Sarah walked to the broken window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the dark places between systems, human ships were already heading back to the outer rim, back to the void where they had learned to be strong. "Build your new civilization," Sarah said. "Make your laws and your treaties. And your careful diplomatic agreements. Trade with each other and pretend the universe is a safe place, but remember this war. Remember what it took to survive?" She turned back to face them. "And when the next threat comes, when something appears that your civilized minds can't understand or defeat, don't wait until you're desperate to call for help. The people willing to fight for you might not always be there when you need them." Sarah walked toward the door, but Kethver called after her. "What about you? What about your people?" "We'll do what we've always done," Sarah replied. "We'll survive. We'll grow strong in the places you're afraid to go. And we'll be ready when the galaxy needs us again. Will you come back?" Sarah paused at the doorway. "Maybe, if you ask nicely." 3 days later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Retribution as the human fleet prepared to leave Coalition space. The surviving alien worlds had chosen new leaders, and were already making plans to rebuild. Some wanted to create a new government based on human military structure. Others wanted to return to the old ways with minor changes. Sarah did not care what they chose. That was not humanity's problem anymore. "All ships report ready for departure," Lieutenant Park announced. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the scattered human vessels. There were so few now. Thousands of good people had died fighting for aliens who had never wanted them in the first place, but they had died as heroes. They had died protecting the innocent and stopping an evil that would have consumed everything. That was worth something. "Signal the fleet," Sarah ordered. "We're going home." As the human ships jumped into hyperspace, Sarah thought about her mother Elena, who had watched the first exile 50 years ago. She had been right about one thing. The galaxy had needed humans again, but Elena had been wrong about something else. The galaxy had not learned to accept humanity. They had only learned to fear what happened when humans were not there to protect them. It was enough. Sarah had seen too much war to expect more than that. Fear and respect were close enough to love. When you were talking about entire civilizations, the stars stretched into lines as the Retribution entered hyperspace. Behind them, Coalition space began the slow process of healing and rebuilding. Ahead of them lay the Outer Rim, where humans had learned to be strong in the darkness. Sarah smiled as she watched the stars rush past. The Coalition had taught humanity an important lesson 50 years ago. They had shown them that sometimes being exiled was the same as being freed, and now humanity was free to become whatever they needed to be in the vast darkness between the stars.